There's no fun segments, no creative ways of structuring this discussion. This is just pure draft analysis injected into your ears.
Pod.
Welcome back to the Pod. The finals are over. Golden State Warriors are NBA champs for the fourth time in 8 years. And that's done with. It's over. It's draft season. We're coming with a full preview of our top 30 prospects, and we're just going to go through them top to bottom. It's not personal. It's strictly business. Summer, how you doing?
Life is good. I am shaking on the inside because I put a lot of time and thought into this top 30. These picks will be crystallized, and I'll have to live with them for good and bad for the rest of my life. And, we both really dove into this draft, and I think we can agree that it isn't last year's draft, but it actually reminds me a lot of 2018 in the sense that it doesn't have 2021's top 5, but it's stacked with big time role guys. And I just love the middle of the first round of this draft. I think that there are a lot of guys that are going to contribute to winning.
Same. Yeah. So just to reiterate, these are our own personal boards, not necessarily the order we think guys are going to go in, but the order that we would rank guys. So I have 5 tiers. Starting at the top is a tier of basically I expect this guy to be an all-star, maybe not surefire all-star, but I think he's going to be a very productive player.
I started my tier 1, so to speak, is I called tier 2 just because I don't think that this draft has an Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, a guy. I'm not going to say Zion because I didn't have him there, but I know you did. So I went from tier 2 onward. Tier 2, I just wrote down disappointed if they don't peak at all-star caliber. And then I had 3, which was guys 5 through 10. And that's just high level starters plus,
Yep.
Tier 4, I called low starters, key role guys. That was my 11 through 19.
Mm-hmm.
And then tier 5 was 20 to 30. And I just wrote guaranteed contracts.
Sounds like we have the same number of guys in all of our tiers. So I'm interested to see how much overlap there is.
Hopefully not much.
Yeah.
I know that you have one dude sitting atop the mountain.
Yep.
Your top tier. Who is it?
It is Paolo Banchero. For some reason, it seems consensus that he's going to go third. It seems like Jabari or Chet is probably going to go 1. Seems like Jabari and Chet to Oklahoma City seems like a lock if Jabari goes number 1. And I think Chet and Jabari are really good prospects, but I think Paolo, his offensive skills can't miss pretty much. For a guy who can handle like that at 6'10", 250, you just don't see that very often. It reminds me a little bit of Blake Griffin, kind of later career Blake Griffin when he's not quite as athletic, but had progressed a lot as a playmaker kind of before he started to downfall with all of his injuries. But just the offensive skill, I think, is can't miss. I think he's almost a guaranteed like 20, 10, and 5. And I don't think his defensive warts are that egregious. I think he's not going to be a great defender, but I think with his size and intelligence, he'll be able to hold his own. And to me, I don't see enough surefire star potential with Chet and Jabari or Ivy that I'm comfortable putting those guys above Paolo when I think his offensive game is extremely polished and has very few holes.
Yeah. Paolo's a mismatch nightmare. If you told me there's one sort of wing superstar, one-man offense in this draft, I'd guess Paolo. I think one place I'm a little bit more negative on this guy is I feel like people have just casually thrown in that he's going to be a great 3-point shooter. I'm not convinced that the 3-point shot is a sure thing. I can easily imagine him getting to like a 35% ballpark. Right now, it's hard for me to picture Paolo consistently pulling up from 3. He's amazing in the mid-range, but I doubt his ability to be dynamic from beyond the arc.
That's possible. And I will say when watching the tape, there's a lot of times where he passes up open threes and he doesn't look totally comfortable taking the 3. And I feel like that's probably what you picked up on a little bit. That's fair. That's a fair concern. It's one of the weaknesses I wrote down for him, though I considered it to be more of a nitpick than like a true weakness. But
Yeah.
that is the only question about his offensive game, I think. And it's not like a glaring hole. It's just something which we're a little uncertain of whether it's going to be really good or just kind of passable, I'd say.
Yeah.
Would you agree with me on defense that you don't think he's like a total disaster in the way that he's being portrayed in some ways, or do you sort of think it's a little more problem?
I think that he's a disaster for his size and physical gifts.
Mm,
But again, I'd much rather bet on those physical tools not being a net negative in the NBA. It's, down the road. He's also 19 years old. And I trust that he's going to care more about defense than he did at Duke. But the awareness off the ball was certainly lacking. He kind of turns on and off on the defensive end.
yep.
And a guy with his frame and his force and his physical power should be a difference maker on the defensive end, not a negative. And he was legitimately a negative at times for Duke. But again, yeah, a body that I'd love to bet on the defensive end. And I just think it will take a basic level of effort to get him to defensively average. He's one of these guys who looks way more athletic on offense than defense.
True.
He's not Obi Toppin, but that's the first guy who comes to mind of that archetype. And so my only concern with him is like, this is a top prospect where we got to think down the line. We got to think playoffs. Does he need to be the anchor of your defense? Do you need to play small ball 5 to maximize him and hide some of his defensive shortcomings? Or do you trust that he can switch onto guards and basically defend like a wing?
Yeah. I trust that he'll be able to do that enough with how good his offense is going to be that he's going to get by with that. Because I don't know. I just trust the body. I trust the sort of fluidity that he has and the strength and the intelligence to just sort of make up for any quickness deficiencies. And I do think ideally he's going to be a 4 because I don't trust him as a rim protector. I think you're probably going to need to play him with a rim protector, which might lead to some team building challenges. But I think the offensive talent is too much to pass up. And just when you watch him, he just does so much. Like the notes I have for him are so much longer than the notes I have for other prospects. Cause it's just like, he's getting a rebound. He's setting a good screen. He's making a good pass. And for all of his scoring abilities, he's not a tunnel vision ball stopper guy. He'll keep it moving. He'll sort of fit into the concept of the offense. So I really like all those things.
Yeah, that Gonzaga tape. There are moments in the Gonzaga matchup, I think especially early on in that game, where I was close to moving Paolo where you have him on your list, on your board. He's one of the best passers in this draft, regardless of size, and he's 6'10", 250. And I know that he can be lethal as a ball handler in the pick and roll, also as the screener. I'd love to see him go to a team where he can embrace both of those roles, not one or the other, because he can be a pick and pop guy, he can dunk on you, and he can certainly make mature decisions on the short roll.
Ironically, he'd pair great with Chet, I think. Like they'd be a great front court together.
Yeah. Actually, because Chet is such a capable 3-point shooter, I think there are a lot of forwards in this draft that I would love to pair with him. And I think that's partly what makes Chet such a great prospect in his own right. All right, let's get off Paolo.
All right.
I did not have Paolo at number 1. I have him in my top tier, along with Jabari Smith, Chet Holmgren, and Jaden Ivey. I have Paolo 2 there. I go Jabari, Paolo, Chet, Jaden Ivey.
So you don't think there's that much separation between those 4?
I don't. But I believe in my order, but I don't think there's significant separation. I think you're underrating Jabari's superstar shot-making ability, potential shot-making ability. It's very rare that a guy of his size, frame, Jabari Smith plays harder than anyone else on the college floor.
Mm-hmm.
I just have complete faith that Jabari, with just a little bit of ball handling refinement, is going to be like a 23 plus points scorer, a guy who can go get you a bucket at the end of the shot clock. I don't need him to be much of a facilitator on offense, and that is certainly one of his weaknesses. But that combined with the fact that I believe that he will be an all defense caliber defender, loose hips. I think he'll be able to slide with wings, and hopefully with time, he'll have the strength to body most fives. You know, there's some fives who are unguardable, and I'm all in on Jabari as the best player in this draft because I think you can plug him into every single playoff team and just say, here's a guy who can get you a bucket on offense and guard most guys on the other end, swallow guys up with his length and agility.
You make a convincing case. I have Jabari at 3. I have Paolo, Chet, then Jabari, and we can go circle back to Chet. But yeah, with Jabari, I do think, I mean, we talked when we were doing the like retrospective Warriors draft profiles, we talked a lot about how, with Stephen Clay in particular, it was undervalued just how great or just how valuable great shooting is to a team. And it's possible that, you know, don't overthink this. I mean, he might be the best shooter in the draft. It's probably like him or AJ Griffin. I don't know. We can see when we get down the board a little bit more, but if it's the best shooter in the draft and he's 6'10", and he's pretty good at defense, like maybe don't overthink it and just take him. But at the same time, I do have real questions about his handle. I don't trust his ability to get shots for himself. He made a lot of really tough, like guys in his legs, mid-range sort of jumpers in college, which are really impressive, but also I don't think are like a sustainable way of getting offense. His shot certainly looks really pure on defense. I trust him to slide his feet because he looked really comfortable sliding his feet against guards and wings in college. I don't think he's a great rim protector. So I think he's definitely going to be more of a forward in the NBA. I don't see him like sliding up to center very much because I think that could be more troublesome for your defense. And I think his defensive ceiling is also lower than Chet's, who we'll talk about. So that's why I had him below Chet as well. But I do think, I mean, he's got a high floor as someone who's 6'10", passable on defense and can shoot. Like at the very least, I comped him to like a kind of a Chris Bosh. Like if Chris Bosh came around today where he'd probably be shooting more threes. I don't think he has quite the inside game of Chris Bosh, but that was one that at least came about to me. Rashard Lewis was another one, but that's more of like a floor comp. I feel like not a realistic one.
Yeah. I just think elite shooting and switchable defense are the two best assets, two most sought after assets in the NBA right now. And he has both of them.
Yeah. Little LaMarcus Aldridge too, like a more mobile LaMarcus Aldridge. There's some of that in there with like, you know, if you have a LaMarcus Aldridge who's switchable, that's like a really good player. So, you know.
Yeah. And if we're also assuming that, you know, there are no Hall of Famers in this draft, we both said we don't think that there's that kind of like generational prospect in this draft. Obviously we can dream with some of these guys, but if you just told me that none of these guys is going to be the best player on a championship team, which is pretty common for NBA drafts, I'd say, okay, then give me Jabari, who I think is going to be one of the best complementary stars in the league for a long time. I agree with you that Paolo has the higher superstar ceiling. I feel like the floor is so unbelievably high for a teenager with Jabari. So that's why I have him at 1.
That's fair.
Let's get to Chet quickly, who I know is one of your favorite defensive prospects you've ever taken a look at.
Yeah. I don't think I totally knew what Chet was going to be before I looked at him. But because I have a lot more questions about his offense than I do about his defense. But on defense, I think he's an absolute grinder. He's so long. He's going to get, you know, he's going to put on some weight, even if his frame is so frail looking right now. But despite that, he's extremely hard-nosed. I encourage everyone, if you want to get an example of Chet's toughness, to see some of the highlights from the game against Memphis in the tournament when he was going against Jalen Duren, who's one of the most physically imposing prospects in this draft. And in the NBA would already be like, as a rookie, one of the more physically imposing players. And he was just like, Duren was, and Duren was just slamming his shoulder into Chet's chest, just like trying to put him in the hoop basically. And Chet, you know, he like blocked his first 2 shots. He forced him into a lot of misses. I thought he like by a large margin got the upper hand in that matchup. So that was very telling to me. And yeah, on defense, I think he doesn't make mistakes, very high IQ. I think he'll probably be switchable. Although they used him mostly in a drop at Gonzaga, so it was a little hard to tell exactly how well he could guard smaller players. But with his length and his IQ, I trust him to just be a really good defender. On offense, I have some other questions about him. He's kind of good at everything, but not great at anything, I'd say, which is why I sort of compare him to. Actually, I heard Simmons say the Al Horford comp, and I think that's actually a decent one. My favorite comparison for Chet is Rasheed Wallace. I think that is like
Sheed.
Because I think, he'll be able to shoot the three. He actually flashes some like post-up game where he can hit this sort of like one leg fader. He can handle it pretty well. He can pass it very well. He's always in the right spot. And yeah, so for that reason, I just think his defense is like elite upside, like defensive player of the year potential. And I think he's going to be a solid offensive player, not a go-to option, but a solid complementary player.
Yeah, it's easy to imagine a world in which Chet is the best player on his team, but not the leading scorer.
Mm-hmm.
I went into this evaluation with a negative mindset because Chet weighs 195 pounds and I am an emotionally wounded Blazers fan. And his body looks like it's going to break. And if the Blazers picked him, his career would be a disaster. His body, he'd be cooked by year 3. You watch the tape and he's a flawless scout. He doesn't make mistakes on either end. His anticipation is incredible. You can see him processing the game on defense, getting a step on guards, using his length to recover. He's incredibly gifted on that end. And he's not a very similar prospect to Anthony Davis, but it was reminiscent of Anthony Davis defensively, the way he just kind of falls into 14, 10, 2 assists, 4 blocks, a steal on a team that is mostly operating offensively through other guys. And he's just like, just by being here, I'm going to fill the stat sheet to that degree.
Yeah.
He is about as smart as any big I can remember watching in college. Yeah. And he was a freshman, barely turned 20. So yeah, I have Chet at 3 because I'm terrified of his body, and that's that's the Blazers' fault. Blame my ex for that, for the way I fear Chet. But I just would much rather bring in Jabari or Paolo with bodies that are easy to project, bodies we've seen before.
Yeah.
But God, Chet was an incredible college freshman.
Yeah, and I do think his ceiling is like Kevin Garnett-ish.
Yeah, I mean, his ceiling's ridiculous. And I also went into it thinking like he's for sure a drop guy, drop coverage, no doubt. And I came away thinking like, he could definitely switch onto some wings because he has such a good sense of how to leverage his length. He can contest a 3-point shot without actually being there when the player decides to shoot. His hand gets there quickly. And he just, like I said, very few mistakes on the defensive end. Some grown men are definitely going to carve out some space against Chet in the early going, but he's nasty. He's not soft. He's frail, but he's not soft. And he plays angry. And I think he's going to be a really good player if he stays healthy. All right, Ivy.
Yeah, so he is just a slight step below Jabari and Chet for me. I have him in like a tier 2A. So he draws a lot of comparisons to the sort of lineage of super athletic point guards, Russell Westbrook, John Morant, John Wall. And I think he has that level of athleticism, and he's 6'4". So because John Morant is like kind of skinny. Jaden Ivey is built. He almost is built more like Donovan Mitchell than he is like John Morant. But as soon as he comes into the NBA, he's going to stand out athletically. And those athletic guards don't tend to fail very much. Like, I mean, with this level of athleticism, it's like basically Dennis Smith Jr. is the only one who didn't really amount to much in the NBA. But the place where I think he lags behind those guys is in passing and playmaking. I don't think he has the vision that John Morant displayed in college or that Russell Westbrook has displayed in the pros, although Russell Westbrook was not known as much of a passer in college. So there's room for that to develop. And yeah, he's a dynamic finisher inside, super athletic. The shot is the big question mark. It doesn't look good, but it goes in. So if that continues, and he seems confident taking it up out to like deep NBA range, halfway between the 3-point line and half court. He's comfortable taking it in college. So yeah, to me, he's definitely got star upside. I would put him a hair below Chet and Jabari because I think he has a lower floor if that shot doesn't translate. And on defense, I think he's very likely going to be a turnstile. But that athleticism is hard to pass up once those top three are off the board.
It took me some time to forgive him for the performance against St. Peter's, his last college game in the tournament. But these are physical tools you got to bet on, and I wouldn't let this guy fall past 4, whether they keep him or not, which I think they should, because these physical tools come along only every few years. And he genuinely is a Ja-esque athlete, but you also can't just expect that he will ever have Ja's basketball intellect. And like you said, he plays more like a shooting guard. He definitely reads more like a score first guy. He should be a plus defender, but he isn't yet. He's kind of better at doing like the Andre Iguodala swipe down on a guy on his teammate's guy who's driving than he is containing the ball himself. Fans of teams that pick in the top 3 are going to be, the casuals are going to be asking their teams why they didn't take Jaden Ivey with the highlight tape that he's going to create in his rookie season.
Or number 4 if Sacramento picks, Keegan Murray there.
Yeah. So I love Ivy, but he is the best. He's the worst of the best in this draft for me.
Yeah. Yep.
How many guys do you have in your second tier?
I've got 7, but it includes Shaedon Sharpe, who I haven't studied. So he just sort of got thrown in there. So 6 guys that I've studied.
Anyone who doesn't work for the University of Kentucky who tells you they've studied Shaedon Sharpe is lying, by the way. I have 5 through 10 in this second tier.
Same.
For me, these guys in this order are Ben Mathurin, Jeremy Sohan, Keegan Murray, Dyson Daniels, Johnny Davis, and Jalen Williams at number 10.
Okay. There's some overlap.
So let's start with Mathurin.
Mm-hmm. He's my 5 as well.
Sweet. It's just very rare that you get a guy who is this athletically gifted and this projectable a shooter. He's already shot the ball extremely well. The 3-point shot looks like it'll translate. We can be fairly certain of that. He's one of the best shooters in the draft. He excels spotting up. He can catch and shoot. I feel like he is improving as an isolation creator. He also has a lot of flair. He uses his crossover to get to his 3-point shot. He can dunk on you and shows real 3-level potential. But just as a threes and slashing guy, I think that there are very few prospects who combine this athleticism with elite shooting potential.
Yeah, he is such a fluid athlete. He's 6'6", good wingspan. He actually has very similar measurables to Andrew Wiggins. He might not be quite the top level athlete that Andrew Wiggins was coming out of college, but he's pretty damn close. Yep. And to me, that my closest comparison for him is like good Wiggins. And I think he's got a 3-and-D floor and an all-star ceiling if that scoring game picks up some. I think his competitive mindset is really good, although I went in because my first introduction to him was watching him in that tournament game, I think against TCU, where he just completely took over the game and I fell in love with him. And then I watched a couple games where he looked like he was floating a little bit more. So I think he's not like ramped up to 100 competitiveness all the time, but when he locks in, he's like really locked in. And he is a showman, as you said. And yeah, I think he's got great upside. He's a sophomore, but he's a pretty young sophomore. So I think you can still expect a lot of growth from him. And yeah, I think you can definitely expect him to be a good catch and shoot 3-point shooter. The pull-up shooting, I'm a little bit more suspect about because he has some sort of weird looking misses, but I think he's going to be a good defender. And yeah. So my comparison for him is sort of good Andrew Wiggins. By the way, Team Canada's looking pretty nice with those 2 guys, Shaedon Sharpe, Desmond Bane. Dylan Brooks. Yeah, but then like as a floor, if he's like prime Wesley Matthews, that's still a high level starter. And I think he has some of that in him as well.
Yeah, one place we disagree on Matherin is the defense. Similar to Banchero, I feel like he has all the tools to be a great defender, but he really lacks fundamentals at times and focus on that end. If he gets to Wes Matthews level wing defense, then he's in my first tier, but I don't expect that for him. He's so competitive that I'm surprised that he can sometimes look not so into it on the defensive end. But I'm willing to bet on Matherin just because of the shooting, the most important skill in the NBA. And I think he can do it off movement. Like you said, the pull up needs some work, but I do think that with time he'll be able to generate threes for himself. And it's just really hard to imagine him not being a really potent offensive player. With his 6'6" frame, 6'11" wingspan, 8'8" standing reach at the combine, he should be at least average on defense.
Yeah, he's definitely better on ball than off the ball. But on ball, he has some wow plays. Like one of the games I watched, he had this incredible block in transition where he like tracked the guy down the court and was like on his hip, went up at the same time, met him at the summit, like blocked the dunk out of bounds. It was really impressive. So he's got that in him for sure.
He has some really loud defensive plays. He also, I think, is an elite college athlete, but he'll just be like a really solid NBA athlete. So I expect a slight regression just in the number of posters he's able to produce as a pro. But I think that his floor is so high just because of the offensive tools. So I have him at 5. I would be ecstatic if the Blazers snagged him at 7, just because I think that he has a pretty high ceiling, and also can help Dame right away, because the shooting will work right out of the gate.
Yeah, he's 5 on my board as well.
All right. Now, who's your number 6?
It's not Jeremy Sohan. He's number 8 for me. I think he was number 6 for you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. My number 6 is Jalen Williams.
Wow. Okay. So much respect. I thought I was going to wow you with Jalen Williams at 10.
Yeah. Jalen Williams. I went into watching this guy for some reason thinking, just on the way he was being hyped, that it was like this athletic wing who could play good defense and maybe he'll shoot threes, maybe he won't. Not the case. This guy is 6'6", 7 foot wingspan, or 6'11" wingspan.
7'2".
7'2" wingspan, beg your pardon. 6'6", 7'2" wingspan. And when I was taking my notes for him, I was watching his games and I'd be like, oh, that's a nice pass. Oh, that's another nice pass. Oh, good luck. And then at a certain point, I realized he was making every pass on time, on target, even ahead of schedule. Bounce pass over the top, every read from the pick and roll, kicking out to 3. And if I was 2 games in, I realized this guy's the best passer in the draft. He's a visionary passer, which to me is like catnip. And he can handle the ball really well for a guy who's 6'6". Like, I think he can be a lead guard in the NBA. I don't see him as a wing. I see him as a lead ball handler. And I didn't even realize how great his shooting percentages were until I looked at the numbers, and he's 50% from the field, over 40% from 3, over 80% from the line. This guy's going to be a really good shooter. And when you just look at a guy who's 6'6", great wingspan with handle and great shooting, and then you throw in the fact that he's, I think, a visionary level passer, like not just a good passer, like, Josh Giddey, who just came in last year, LaMelo Ball. I think he's in their class as like a visionary level passer. And when you put that all together, combined with a handle, and I think he's smart enough that he'll be able to play decent defense with that size, I just don't see how you can let this guy slide. Like, everyone in the NBA is looking for big wing-sized guys who can initiate offense and shoot and handle and play make, and he can do all those things. The only question mark with him is his burst, because he definitely looks a little slow. But I think he'll be able to compensate for that with his IQ and his size. And I just can't get enough of the guy. I don't think anyone's going to pick him above like 13, but whoever picks him, assuming they don't pick him at like 3, I'm probably going to say they're the winners of the draft, because I think he's that good.
Yeah. Pick and roll wizard. When it comes down to it, the NBA right now is a pick and roll league, and Jalen Williams has a deep pick and roll bag. He's such a high level passer. I love his hit aheads. I love that the ball never sticks in his hands. I love how comfortable he is finishing with either hand. Not a crazy athlete, but he can cut to his left and hit a guy in the corner with the left hand. I don't think he's a lead guard in the NBA, but I think he can share the keys. We can give 2 keychains out for the car with Jalen and whoever his backcourt mate is in the NBA. But I also couldn't believe. I mean, I guess he played at Santa Clara, and guys don't have a large sample of him playing against real pedigree guys, but it's some of the best tape in this class.
Yeah. And he's got a 39-inch vertical too. Like he might not look that bursty, but
Yeah,
like 39 is 39.
he's a smooth operator. His vertical he tested incredibly well at the combine. Length, his agility, he was fast. He jumped high. I don't think he plays like a 39-inch vert guy,
No.
but again, he has a 7'2" wingspan, 8'9" standing reach. He has the standing reach of a lot of NBA fours,
Yeah.
and he's only getting stronger.
And you talk about pedigree guys. Like I watched both the games he played against Gonzaga this year, and
He could hang.
he can hang. He put Chet Holmgren on his ass hard with a crossover. Like I could feel the thud through my computer. He hit the ground so hard.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah. And he was getting into the paint. He was making things happen. He does struggle. I think the biggest thing for him is finishing inside against NBA length and rim protection. That's going to be, I think, his biggest challenge. But yeah, some of the passes he makes, I just have like, wow, awesome, incredible, fantastic, like all of those words written in my notes so many times.
There isn't a pick and roll read that I didn't see him make.
Nope.
He had every counter. I felt like he was constantly generating the best possible shot for his team, and there was always a place for guys who do that in the league.
Absolutely.
I love Jalen Williams. I can't imagine where he'd be on boards everywhere if he played in one of the major conferences.
Yep.
5'10" or so as a high school junior, so he has that growth spurt thing going. That explains how he ended up at Santa Clara in the first place, because a guy with his current physical tools is not ending up at Santa Clara. He's been a riser on absolutely everyone's board because of the combine he had. He also absolutely thrived in the 5-on-5 at the combine, which some people value more than others. But, you know, I think it means something when someone just looks like by far the smartest guy on the floor with other legitimate draft prospects. And I remember when Dante DiVincenzo dominated the 5-on-5 a few years ago, and it just solidified him for me as a gamer who will do it in moments of pressure.
Yeah.
And Jalen Williams was the veteran on the floor at the combine and tested really well. And like you said, has some of the best pick and roll tape in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And his defense is already really solid. I think he's fundamentally sound on that end. He's not super strong, so I still think despite his length, he's better guarding guys his size and smaller.
Yeah.
But I would hope that with an NBA weight training program that he could size up a little bit more on the defensive end, guard more threes, and maybe even a couple fours with his frame. And it's still a developing body as well, because like I said, he grew so late.
Yep. Yeah. And real quick, some of my comps for him, I think D'Angelo Russell, they kind of have a similar vibe, although he's bigger. And I think probably better defender than Russell. Kind of Hito Turkoglu in the modern game, who I think would be a lot better now than when he actually played, although Turkoglu's bigger, but I think that's a solid one. I think as a floor, like I could see him being Joe Ingles if the handle doesn't translate and the athleticism doesn't translate, but that's still like a solid level starting player. And I'm going to whisper very quietly that he kind of reminds me of Manu, and it scares me a little bit.
Yeah, sacrilege. But I know you wouldn't say. I know you wouldn't say if you weren't hearing it in your head.
Yeah.
He also just has some incredible YouTube interviews, like just hearing the way he thinks the game.
Oh.
It sounds exactly the way you'd think watching how quickly he processes his offensive sets and gets his teammates involved. And I think that he's going to be an NBA starter for a long time, which makes him more than worthy for the number 6 spot on your list. All right.
Yep.
So who else is someone in this second tier that you think you're particularly high or low on?
So I can kind of use this as an avenue to talk about two guys, one that I'm very high on and one that I'm probably relatively lower on. They play the same position. That's Keegan Murray, who I'm relatively lower on. Most people have him, he's forward out of Iowa. Most people have him going in the 6 or 7 range. And EJ Liddell, who's a forward out of Ohio State. And I really don't see that much difference between the two of them in terms of quality of prospects, honestly. And Liddell's being mocked in the 20s. I saw him mocked in the 30s when I was looking today, which is just crazy to me. I don't know how you can watch him and his teammate Malachi Branham at Ohio State and
Yeah.
think that Branham is the guy to pick, because I just love everything about Liddell. But I guess we can start with Keegan and then I can talk about Liddell, or I can start with Liddell.
All right. Just don't make me wait for Jeremy Sohan too long.
Keegan Murray, I'm a little bit lower on just because I don't. So he's big. I think he's going to be a solid starter because he'll be a good team defender. I think he'll be able to shoot threes, be a pretty good rebounder. He reminds me, he's a little bit of a tweener. Like, you don't know if he's like a wing or a big, which is rare. Usually now tweeners are kind of great in this modern NBA, but I'm a little confused where exactly he's going to slot on the NBA court. But he strikes me as kind of just like a solid starter. I just don't see much of a ceiling with him in terms of creating his own shot. And he put up massive numbers at Iowa, which are kind of, honestly, when I was watching him, I was like, how did this guy get to 24 points every game? Because it seems like it's a lot of like kind of just like, I don't know, he just somehow ends up at 24 points off of like little flip shots and threes. And it doesn't seem to me like it'll translate that well to the NBA in terms of like a volume scoring role. But you have him a little bit higher than me, so I'd be curious to hear what you think.
I just think that he is sure to put up numbers as a scorer. The 3-point shot is likely to come, but a name I constantly see being brought up with this guy is Tobias Harris. And he doesn't have Tobias's strength, but he has a lot of Tobias's savvy and his ability to score from weird angles in the paint. He is a great defensive rebounder, which was something that made me like him a little bit more as the evaluation went on. And he kind of has a nose for the ball. I think that he's an okay defender. Another guy who looks more fluid on the offensive end athletically than he does on the defensive end. But just, I think that we need to take into account that he averaged 23 a game in the most competitive league in America. You don't fall into that point tally. He has great touch around the basket. Another guy who's very ambidextrous, can finish with either hand. I agree with you, though, that I think that his ceiling is not what the college stat line would suggest. And so I have Keegan at 7, just because I think, because I think his floor is really, really high. And I don't think there's any way that he isn't putting up 15 plus points very soon in the NBA. But I think defensively, it could get a little bit tricky figuring out where to place him, because he isn't big enough, strong enough as a rim protector, I think, to survive as your 5. And I do have some doubts about his ability to switch on to smaller guys.
Yeah, that's fair. But getting back to the guy who I have one spot above him in EJ Liddell, who some team is going to draft at like 26, and I'm going to, them and whoever drafts Jalen Williams, I will declare the winners of the draft in all likelihood. Just because I just don't understand why Liddell isn't higher. It's not, I mean, he's younger actually than Keegan Murray, so it's not like age is super working against him. He's a strong built power forward, great physicality, great motor. He's smart. He can pass. He can rebound. He made a lot of tough shots, particularly in the mid range. I think his shooting touch is good. I trust him to be able to develop into a 3-point shooter. I think he's going to be a versatile defender who can guard. He can switch onto wings. Absolutely good luck posting him up, because he is an absolute cinder block. And I saw many college big men try and fail to move him inside. And I just think I think like Grant Williams is a realistic floor for him. And that is someone who was a really valuable player for the Celtics in the playoffs this year. They definitely don't win the Milwaukee series without Grant Williams on their team. And then as a ceiling, I see like a lot of Paul Millsap in him. I think he's got kind of that scoring game and that just sort of hard-nosed kind of offensive rebounding, making things happen around the basket, drawing fouls, hitting mid-range shots. I just don't see a lot of holes in his game. There's obviously stuff he can improve on, like with his shooting, but I think he's got very good defensive potential, solid offensive potential. And if you're not excited by Paul Millsap, I looked it up and he made 4 All-Star teams. So that's pretty good to get a guy like that in the back half of the first round where it's projected he's going to go. And yeah, when I look at him and Keegan Murray, I think I like Liddell more on defense. Murray's probably a little bit more, or he's more of a sure thing on offense, but I think Liddell has potential to develop in ways that will make him really useful in the NBA. And yeah, him and Jalen Williams are who I'm hitching my wagon to in this draft.
Liddell is incredibly nimble for a guy of his weight, his size. He's very powerful, but also quick. And I really like the way he slides on the defensive end. I agree with you. It's just rare you get a guy who's that physical defensively, who you actually expect to shoot threes pretty well in the NBA. I think if Grant Williams is his floor, he's much less annoying to fellow teammates than Grant Williams. Like, by all accounts, EJ Liddell is like an incredible teammate, morale guy, emotional anchor for Ohio State. Seems to have some of that PJ Tucker DNA. Like, I just need to see the world where Liddell falls to the Heat and just like what they can do for him.
Or Milwaukee.
Because he already has some of that nastiness in his DNA. And, he just looks painful to play against. He has a lot of footballish aggression to his game. He'll dunk on you on one end. He'll try to embarrass you, pin your layup on the backboard on the other end. And I don't expect him to block shots and protect the rim as effectively as he could in college. But I think the fact that he was such a great shot blocker his last year at Ohio State just is a testament to his activity. And just like, he's not a guy you forget is on the floor. When you're watching an Ohio State game, like, he's popping on both ends frequently.
Yeah, he's always making stuff happen. And that's a good transition to the guy who's number 6 on your board, who is also always making stuff happen, Jeremy Sochan.
Yeah, Jeremy Sochan. I think that this guy is going to be a global celebrity in a few years. Forget the hair, forget the amazing personality, the gap in his front teeth, all the things that make him Jeremy Sochan, identifiably Jeremy Sochan. Let me ask you this. If Herb Jones was in this draft, where would you take him?
Oof. Probably somewhere between 9 and 14.
Yeah. So Sochan is a much different defender than Herb Jones, but I actually believe that in his rookie season, he could have that level of defensive impact. I would encourage our listeners to just rewatch the North Carolina game. I feel like that Baylor comeback in the tournament is just the embodiment of the energy that Jeremy Sochan brings to the floor. We throw around, he can guard 1 through 5 a little bit too liberally with NBA prospects. This is the closest guy we have in the draft to guarding 1 through 5.
Mm-hmm.
Just a crazy fluidity on the defensive end. His offense came on late. The offense is certainly a question mark. But I believe in his jump shot. I don't expect him to be a high volume 3-point shooter. He shot like 29% at Baylor. I think that he will be respectable from behind the arc with time. And I think that there's some real creative potential there. I think that this could be a short roll killer. I think he can, he has great vision, and his assist totals in college don't tell the whole story. Watch the tape. He has an eye for finding guys on the perimeter when the defense collapses on him in the paint. But the real calling card here is the defense. I believe that he is an all defense level prospect. If he isn't an elite defender in the NBA, I will be very disappointed. He doesn't have the loudest defensive plays. He's not going to get a ton of pick six steals. He's not going to have a lot of LeBron chase down blocks, but it's those in between, those filling the right spaces, using his length, his 6'9", 230 frame to protect the rim and also switch out onto smaller guys and contain them and swallow up drives. I believe that he is a truly elite defensive prospect, and I have enough faith in the jump shot and his playmaking ability with time that I think that he is 100% a top 6 player in this draft.
Yeah, he's my 8. but I agree wholeheartedly on the defense. My comp for him is Sean Marion. I think that he's got that level of defensive potential, and similar questions about the jump shot, although it ended up working out well enough for Marion. I think there's a little bit of young Boris Diaw in there too, like before Boris Diaw kind of got very into the wine and cheese element. But yeah, he's just always making stuff happen. He always has he's always around the ball. He's got great awareness. I think whoever gets him, if it's in the, it seems like now he's getting pushed down boards a little bit in the mocks that I've seen. If you get him after 10, I think that's fantastic value. I would have him at 8, and yeah, he's going to be a really fun, exciting player to watch, I think.
Yeah, another guy I'd be ecstatic to see on the Blazers. He has a really strong handle for his size and really feels like he's just scratching the surface on offense, which is why I think if the shot becomes even decent, he has real star potential, which you would not expect for a guy who averaged 9 points and 6 rebounds. I'll start with one guy that I know I'm way higher on than consensus.
Yeah,
I have Dalen Terry of Arizona at 13.
Goodness.
I wrote down old Iguodala for Dalen Terry. I think that he is, look, I'm not going to say this guy's going to become an all-time great defender, but I think he is an elite defensive prospect. I love his passing game. We talked about just how frustrating it is watching the Arizona tape with the amount of responsibility and time with the ball they give to Krisa. I wanted Dalen Terry to be running this offense along with Ben Mathurin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are very few guys who bring Dalen Terry's energy on both ends. I love how well-rounded he is. If you told me his jump shot was a lock, then I would have him in my top 7, because I think he's that great as a defender and that talented as a facilitator. And I love the way he pushes the ball on the break. I love his length. I love his switchability on defense. And I think that his frame will fill out with time, because he's another guy who is incredibly long. He has a center's standing reach, but is better at guarding guys his size and smaller, because like Jalen Williams, he still has to put on a little bit more weight to really survive in the NBA with wings. But I think his competitiveness is very rare, and I am a Dalen Terry stan.
13 is a lot higher than me, I can tell you that. I've got him at 24.
Okay.
And yeah, I sort of would describe him as an energetic, irritant, defensive swingman with, I think, some passing upside. My number 1 comp for him was Caleb Martin.
God, that's fucked up.
I also said Matt Barnes. I think his energy and his activity on both ends of the court is great. But I have significant questions about his offense, and I'm just going off of the Arizona tape. So I don't know if there's other stuff he showed earlier or in pro days and stuff. Because at Arizona, he was really just kind of getting the ball off a handoff, dribbling a couple times with his right hand and pitching it to the other wing. So you weren't seeing much from him. He would hit threes from time to time and sort of get offensive rebound putbacks, but I really didn't see much in the way of creating his own offense. But although I do think he's a good passer, so yeah, he was someone who was a little hard to evaluate. To me, I mean, he has the potential to hit big, because I really like his energy and his mentality. But I just have a lot of questions about his offense, which is why I downgraded him.
Yeah, I think he has a pretty high floor, because he has a lot of the sort of Terrence Mann intangibles that I loved about Mann, and his draft just does a lot of things that help your team win. He didn't get to the line enough, but he shot 74% from the free throw line as a sophomore. He only averaged 8 points, but he was 36% from 3 on a low sample. We have reason to believe the shot isn't broken, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I just think that his combination of athleticism, energy, switchability, I think that this is a guy who could really end up guarding 1 through 4s. And if he can just become a reasonable catch and shoot guy from 3, his ceiling is actually extremely high. I'm surprised you don't like him more, because he fits that sort of long great passer, high IQ archetype that I know that you have affinity for.
Yeah, no, he was one of the hardest guys for me to evaluate, I think, just because of the games where I watched him. It was just a little hard to project exactly what he was. But yeah, I might revise this a little bit. I'm not sure because I definitely like the outline of him. And yeah, so I might end up moving him up a couple spots, but he'll be in the 20s for me.
It might have been a mistake watching the full UCLA game because it was one of his best games of the year. He had 15, 7, and 7. It was just kind of a perfect encapsulation of all of the things he can do on both ends. He was getting a defensive rebound, initiating his own run out, hit ahead to Matherin for a 3 in the corner.
That was the last game I watched. In the first 2 games, I was like, this guy looks like a second rounder, basically. Yeah. And then I watched that UCLA game and I was like, oh, okay, I can see it.
You need talented role players who don't need the ball. And he definitely is a selfless, creative, positive teammate. And I think he has a lot of the things that I want my team to have.
We haven't talked about Johnny Davis yet. I'm curious where you have him. I don't know if you mentioned him in that like 5 to 10 tier of yours or if he's very low for you, but I've got him at 7. I really like him.
I have him at 9. So
okay,
similar. Yeah, I'd say I'm pretty much at consensus with him.
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit higher than consensus, but I just wanted to mention him because he was one of my favorite guys to watch. Like his game against Purdue, he has 37 points and he's hounding Ivy up and down the court. Yeah. I think he's got elite competitiveness. He might be the most competitive guy in this draft among the guys that I watched. He's not an elite level defensive prospect like a Jalen Suggs was last year, but he competes. He's in the right spots. He's smart. I think he's going to be a high level defender. And then he's got some really nice scoring game, which, you know, it's mostly in the mid range, which is a little bit tough in today's NBA because you have to be really efficient at that for those to be good shots. But I trust him, I think, with the way his shot looks and his percentages to extend out to at least catch and shoot threes. And I think he'll be good as like a secondary or third scoring option, which with good defense and some playmaking and seems like a very high character guy. I really like him. So I'm hoping he falls to the Knicks at 11 because I feel like that would be a great pick for them.
Yeah, it's rare that you and Tibbs, like the middle of the Venn diagram really works out for you guys.
Yeah.
Tibbs must be chomping at the bits to get this guy because of the defense, the rebounding, like you said, all of those non-scoring tools that he brings to the table. My one concern with him is just extending it out to the 3.
Mm-hmm.
He has a little bit of like a pushy jump shot that I think tends to work better in the mid-range than from NBA distance.
Yeah.
So I'd be worried because he's not going to be a guy you want to have the ball all the time in the league. And so, you know, if he's not a reliable catch and shoot option and his athleticism doesn't play quite as well in the NBA, what is his ceiling on offense? You know, maybe with his aggressiveness and his rebounding for his size, he has some Josh Hardy skills, and that it would be a pretty awesome outcome for him. I just, in this range, in that 5 to 10 range, I'm looking for guys with a little bit more star potential, and I don't believe Johnny Davis has that.
That's fair. Yeah, I think it's a little bit for me. Like it's a little bit. What would happen if Rip Hamilton played in the NBA today? I feel like that's kind of the guy who I see a lot with him because he scores a lot off of cutting and in that sort of mid-range area. Yeah. And he doesn't. Another one of my concerns with him is he's not a great dribble penetrator and like dribbling to the basket and finishing at the basket. But that's a guy where I think I would just bet on the mindset and the person. And
totally.
with the nascent level of skill there is pretty high as well. So
yeah. And he's really long, actually. He's not as small as I think people are making him out to be. He measured very well at the combine. I think that he can guard threes. He's certainly competitive enough to try. And he's going to be a coach's favorite from day one.
Yeah.
I have questions about Shaedon Sharp's buy-in. I have questions about Dalen Terry's jump shot. I feel like Johnny Davis doesn't have any really sharp weaknesses and is just like a super well-rounded prospect who you know is going to bring a competitive edge that every team in the lottery needs.
Absolutely.
Let me go to another guy. Okay, Shaedon Sharp. Let's just say I had him at 11 on my list because he has incredible physical tools. we are not guys who have second spectrum or synergy. We have YouTube and we have podcasts and we study what we can. And I feel like even we have heard some murmurings from guys like Kyle Mann at the Ringer, just that like things didn't go so well at Kentucky, that there are questions about Shaden Sharp's maturity. I like guys that just want to show up and play. And
Yeah.
so maybe his physical talent is as incredible as the high school evaluation indicates, and he will end up being a top 4 player in this from this draft. I'm okay not picking him in the top 10 just because I know nothing. And I also, you know, from the limited high school tape I watched, I think I could count on one hand the number of times he passed the ball. And I would not want to play pickup basketball with that guy. But certainly, I mean, if Johnny Davis had Shaden Sharp's physical attributes, he'd probably be the number 1 player on our board. So there's that. You want to add anything to Sharp, or I think that about covers?
No, that about covers it. Once you get past like the top 8 guys, I'd be comfortable just taking a swing on him because the potential is so high. But yeah.
The first post Chet center that I had on my list was Mark Williams.
Same.
Yeah, I had Mark at 12. I don't even want to go too deep into that. I just think that he's an incredibly effective rim protector who shows a little bit of switchability for a guy who's that massive. He had one of the biggest standing reaches in the history of the combine. He has a monster frame. I think he's a great lob catcher on offense who doesn't ask to do too much, which is important with your center. You need somebody who's willing to buy into that role.
For sure, yeah. He reminds me a lot of Rob Williams, who was huge in this year's playoffs. I think he's going to be a good starting center for a long time. He's probably not going to be an all-star, but yeah, he's also my first center after Chet. My second center after Chet is honestly probably the person I'm highest on compared to consensus, but I have him in like the middle of the first round, so I'm not like, pounding the table for him. But I love Christian Coloco from Arizona. I think so. I have him at 17. Most of the mocks I've seen with him have him in the second round. I just think he is an absolutely elite rim protector. And also I think he's more switchable than any of the other centers except for Chet. I think he's more switchable than Duren. I think he's more switchable than Mark Williams.
We disagree. I don't think he can move in space like Mark Williams, but I think he's even more physically gifted than Mark Williams, just in terms of like the power he generates. I like the way Mark Williams slides a little bit more than Coloco. And there were a lot of moments in my Coloco evaluation where I just felt like this is like an incredible body, but there are a lot of fundamentals to figure out on both ends. He already has the rim protection down. I didn't feel good about the way he guarded in space.
Interesting. I disagree because I was watching the UCLA game as well for him, and I saw him switch on to Jaime Jaquez a number of times, who's like, a player who's going to be drafted probably, right?
Yeah.
Jaime Jaquez.
He's in the conversation.
Okay. And he was moving his feet with him like 3 different possessions, forcing misses, getting blocks. Centers who were trying to go up over him had a lot of trouble finishing him over at the rim. And he's just this guy who like, he can kind of block with either hand. He doesn't seem to, he jumps really quickly. Like one of the problems I have with Duren is, for as athletic as he is, he kind of has to load up to jump. So I think he's not going to be as great of a rim protector as Williams and Coloco are. But yeah, I see a lot of Clint Capella type potential with Coloco. And if not that, then sort of a Nick Claxton as well, although he's not the kind of live wire athlete that Claxton is necessarily, but I really did like the way he moved his feet in space as well. So I think he's a great defensive potential. Offense leaves a lot to be desired because he really can't do anything except dunk, although his free throw percentage was pretty good. But yeah, I do have him in the mid first round. And as a result, I'm also lower on Duren. It sounds like you are as well.
Yeah, we're both relatively low on Duren. I have him at 17. In terms of Coloco, I just think he's really, I see the physical tools. I agree with you that like his ceiling on defense is very high, but he's really raw for a 22-year-old. Meanwhile, you got Williams, who I just feel like it's incredibly rare that you find someone who can move like he can at his size. And he has a very limited skill set on offense. And I like that because he's a guy that I want, protecting the rim and rim running. And I think that he does both of those things incredibly well. Those are his 2 functional skills. And I think they'll both translate immediately.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Yeah, and then with Koloko, I mean, I was watching him against Illinois going up against Kofi Coburn, who was one of the more physically imposing guys in college basketball. And like 3 possessions in a row, he forced a miss from Kofi. Then he got a steal on the next possession. Then he blocked a 3-pointer. Uh, then he's getting offensive rebounds. Like he's very active on the defensive end. I really like that. And with Duren, the reason that I wouldn't take him super high is I think he's going to be a fine defensive center, but I don't see like all defense level potential with him the way that I do with Mark Williams and Koloko. And if you're not going to do that and you're just going to like dunk on offense, which is pretty much what Duren's going to do, although they're probably going to be louder dunks than Koloko and Mark Williams have. I don't trust his offensive game enough where I'm going to like use him as a post up threat. So
Yep.
I'm just not that interested in drafting that guy in the first half of the first round.
Yeah, it's 2022. DeAndre Jordan is out and Rob Williams is in. We both had Duren low. I think we both had AJ Griffin pretty low as well, right? I have AJ Griffin at 18, which I know would raise some eyebrows.
I ended up bumping him up a little bit. I have him at 13.
Yeah.
He's in my like sort of just solid starters tier. He's below the like 5 to 10 range for me, obviously at 13. At first I had him lower, then I kind of went back when I was watching some of Trevor Keels's footage and I was seeing some other games and seeing how AJ Griffin just knocked down so many 3-pointers that,
Yeah.
With that size and 6'6" and the pedigree and the shooting, it seems like he's got a good shot at being just like a really serviceable wing. I do have real questions about his defense. He did not look very athletic to me when I was watching him, which I guess is kind of different from how he was in high school because of some injury that he had. But once you're past those like sort of starter with all-star upside type guys, I'd be fine taking him. Like if the Knicks took him at 11 with all the guys in my top 10 gone, I'd be fine with it. I don't see like all-star upside with him from what I watched, but he might be the best shooter in the draft, him or Jabari Smith. So yeah, at a certain point, just take those guys.
Yeah, we just talked about this with the looking back on the Warriors scouting reports, just how like when in doubt, take Cam Johnson, take the best shooter in the draft. And so I'm probably going to regret having AJ Griffin at 18, but I just hated his defense. I thought he was clueless on that side.
Yeah.
And again, he has the 5-star pedigree. You mentioned the injuries. He's clearly not the athlete he was as a prospect just a couple of years ago. But I have Ochai Agbaji at 14 and AJ Griffin at 18. And those are kind of two guys in the 3-and-D category of this draft. And I can't call AJ Griffin a 3-and-D guy. He's just a 3 guy. And I just love the way that Ochai fit into the team concept at Kansas. I felt like he's long, athletic, and committed to that end in a way that AJ Griffin will need to be because he's not going to be one of the first options in an offense. I know that. But yeah, he's a great shoot. He's a great 3-point shooter. If these are guys that are going to be fitting into limited roles, I want something on both ends. And I think Ochai Agbaji is the bona fide 3-and-D option I would go for in the lottery way before AJ Griffin.
Yeah. Those are two guys who I was sort of going back and forth with. I have Griffin at 13, Agbaji at 15. I think it's quite possible. I mean, I went with Griffin with the age tiebreaker. It's possible that Agbaji is what Griffin looks like in 2 or 3 years because he is that much younger than Agbaji.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Oshai's shot looks fantastic. I think shot with more vault. Like he got up a lot more shots than AJ Griffin did. He's got a quicker release. He gets up higher on it. So I think has a higher potential to be like a high volume 3-point shooter than AJ Griffin does. Whereas Griffin was more just like dead eye when he had time to get it off. Cause I do think his release is a little bit slower. It was just money. I mean, he shot 45% from 3. It was pretty, insane efficiency, but I really like both of them. I would definitely feel more certain about Agbaji, but yeah,
but you might bet on Griffin's ceiling.
Yeah. That's kind of where I give the tiebreaker.
Agbaji also has gotten so much better each year in college that I'm not sure that the progression has slowed down yet for him.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a big Agbaji fan. I don't know how high compared to consensus 14 is, but I think, decently. Do you have any Ousmane Dieng thoughts? Because am I wrong, or was he the first guy that you took a look at?
He was the first guy I evaluated, which honestly, he might have suffered a little bit from that. The framework is very interesting. He's big. He can pass. Looks like he can shoot, catch, and shoot threes. Looks like he has pretty good feel for the game. The one thing I couldn't get past with him is it just looked like he wasn't that excited to be out there, which worries me. He definitely drifted a lot. He had a tendency to kind of look like he was just out for a jog. And I don't know if that was just the physicality of the Australian league where he kind of didn't want to get into all that. But I mean, look, he's someone I'd take a shot on at the back of the lottery, like around, picks somewhere between picks 11 to 14. I don't think it's crazy to take him because he's certainly got a high ceiling with his size. He's what, 6'9", 6'10". He's huge and his shot looks good off the catch. So he's a guy where you can project a little bit of what you want onto him because he's a bit of a blank canvas, but he's got all the tools for sure. And I could see it. It sounds like teams are looking at him in the top 10. So someone might take a shot on him.
I hope for his sake he goes to a team like the Spurs or the Pelicans who have a goated shooting coach, because that will really be the swing skill for him, like it is for so many guys, but especially for him because he kind of has some latent star skills. And that's what scares me about Jeng is like if his best skills are his ball handling and playmaking at 6'9", but he can't shoot, then will he even be able to utilize those skills? Because he doesn't, for me, project to be the guy with the ball in your offense. So if he doesn't reach that threshold, those interesting talents he has might be all for naught. So you're really betting on your developmental team to get him to shooting competence, which I am not willing to bet on. He has kind of another push jump shot. He hasn't shot good percentages in Australia. And I say all of this, I have Ousmane Dieng at 19, which I think is fairly low. I know Russillo was saying that he has him somewhere in his top 10.
Yeah,
and
a
lot of people, I mean, I haven't seen him out of the lottery anywhere, but I have Dieng at 19. And at the same time, I'm watching him. I remember I was watching him play a game against Cairns Taipans in the NBL. It was the second quarter. I found this full game and he catches the ball in the left wing. He fakes a pass to the corner, attacks the paint with his right hand, goes behind the back, freezes the defender, crosses back to the right, just puts the guy on skates and finishes with a layup. And that was a wow moment for me where I'm like, okay, like this dude is high on some boards for a reason. His ceiling is high. He's incredibly fluid with the ball for a guy that size, but I don't feel like he has the right skills for the role that he'll fill as a pro or as an NBA pro.
He's a little Cam Reddish-y to me.
Yeah.
Where
a little Jalen Johnson-y.
He'll show these flashes where you're just like, God, I can't believe he's doing that at that size.
Yeah.
And then he'll just kind of go through long stretches of the game where he's just sort of jogging around from corner to corner and not really, you kind of forget he's out there. So, someone's going to take a shot on him and I wouldn't blame him if it's after 10. But yeah.
Yeah. And we'll feel a lot differently about him if he goes to the Spurs or some really competent developmental program.
Yeah.
And maybe he comes out the other end looking like the guy that Russillo sees. Okay. That was Dieng. I have him at 19. I have Kennedy Chandler at 21 because I know the weirdest guy to compare him to in this draft is Chet Holmgren, but the one thing he had in common with Chet Holmgren in my evaluation is I don't think I saw Kennedy Chandler make a single bad mistake in all of the Kennedy Chandler minutes I watched. I fucking love his decision making. And if his only real downside is the size, and I know he weighs 172 pounds, he has some length. He has about Cole Anthony's standing reach. He's big enough to survive. The question is he too thin? And if he is, then screw it. I missed him. I missed it. I had him at 21. I just love the decision making. I love his confidence. He had a 42-inch vert at the combine. He was one of the fastest guys there too, which I did not see in the tape, I will say. He seems like a water bug. He has that quickness. He tested incredibly well at the combine. He's definitely not that type of explosive lead guard. But I do think that if with some weightlifting, he can grow into a Tyus Jonesy, really capable backup NBA point guard.
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing him as anything more than a bench scoring guard. he had made a horrible first impression on me. The first game I watched of his first 3 possessions, he gave up a layup and then he turned it over and it led to a wide open three. So that was a bad introduction, I'll say.
I watched the wrong games.
Yeah. I think the only things that you can really like bank on him having for sure are ball handling and quickness. I think he'll probably be a good shooter, but I don't think he's like a pure knockdown guy like Isaiah Thomas was in college necessarily. New Isaiah Thomas, not Pistons Isaiah Thomas. And I think he's just, yeah, he's so small. He's really going to defend. He's really going to struggle defending.
Yeah, he's got to be a really strong 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
But
I see
again,
like some
there are moments.
campaign
Yeah,
with him.
that hurts. He needs to put on the weight. I hope his frame can handle it so that he can guard all ones, because he's going to need to be able to do that.
Yeah.
He's smart. I trust his decision making on defense. Obviously, you saw a different side of things. I like his vision. I like his Gretzky assists that he had for hit the bigs he played with at Tennessee. Finished a drive by dumping it off to someone behind him under the rim. I think that there were moments in the playoffs where I thought the Celtics could really use a guy like Kennedy Chandler, who wouldn't be so scared of Drew Holiday being on his hip. Like you said, the ball handling is a sure thing with Chandler. Floor general demeanor with the ball in his hands.
Yeah.
And that's a dying breed. And I agree with you. The size might just do him in, but I want to bet on someone with his mind and his competitiveness and his well-rounded skill set. The 1 second rounder I put down was Justin Lewis of Marquette.
Okay. Not familiar.
He's a 6'8", 7'2" wingspan combo forward. Defense is a little suspect, but he has the tools to be good on that end. I love his smooth offensive game. I think that he's going to be able to shoot threes, and he's a strong rebounder with some better conditioning, could become a long-time pro. So Justin Lewis, Marquette, that's my second round sleeper.
Mm-hmm.
Closing thoughts.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this draft. This is the most in-depth I've been on a draft ever. So I'm really curious to see both how it shakes out on Thursday and sort of as the years go on, how the big board ages. But yeah, especially with kind of a relatively weaker crop of free agents this summer, I think there's potential to be a lot of activity on draft night with teams trying to kind of improve themselves there and potential for trades. What's going to happen with Sacramento? Is Ivy going to go there? Or if Ivy goes to the Pistons at 5, I think that's an insane fit with Cade Cunningham. I think that would be awesome for Pistons fans.
Or Halliburton at 6, I think is also a fantastic fit.
Yeah, well, I think there's no way Ivy would get past 5.
Yeah, he's not going to get to 6, but and I don't know what the defense would look like with Halliburton, but I love the idea of those two sharing an offense.
Yeah, and it's a weird draft. Like guys, once it gets past about 5 or 6, like I've seen big boards with whole lot of different combinations of players ranging from 6 to the end of the first round. So I'm very curious to see how individual teams have guys stacked up, if there's a lot of trading back to try to get guys they think will be there, or if they just say, screw it, let's take them and not mess around. So yeah. And yeah, keep an eye out for whoever takes Jalen Williams, because I will be high on their board.
Yes. And I think what stands out to me after going through all these evaluations is just like the defensive depth in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
From Chet to Jabari to Sohan to Johnny Davis, Dalen Terry, Mark Williams.
Even a guy like Walker Kessler, who we didn't talk about.
Yeah, Walker Kessler, we didn't even mention.
Protector.
Dyson Daniels, who I had at 8 and we didn't really talk about, but has a ton of defensive potential. I think this is a really deep defensive draft. And I think that's why you'll see a lot of these guys sticking in the league for a long, long time. And I also highly recommend that all our listeners just do a cursory YouTube search of Gabriel Procida of Bologna. I'm just going to leave it at that. It's an incredible watch. Might be the most misleading highlight tape since Mario Hezonja, but it's absolutely beautiful. I don't know what's going on with Gabriel Procida, but but if your team takes him in at the end of the first round or somewhere in the second round, just know you're in for some great content.
Yeah, I can tell you some contender in the 20s is going to take someone who I just absolutely love. And I'm going to be like, oh my God, these guys have really set themselves up for the next, 5-year window or whatever. But
Yeah.
I'm just, really excited to see how it turns out.
So just to recap kind of the highlights of our boards, I had Sohan at 6, Jalen Williams at 10, Dalen Terry at 13, Liddell at 15, Kennedy Chandler at 21.
Yeah, for me, Jalen Williams at 6, Johnny Davis at 7, Liddell at 10, Keegan Murray at 11 for a guy I was relatively lower on, and then Christian Coloco at 17, another guy who I was much higher on.
Yeah, and we'll see if Jalen Duren haunts us for years to come.
Yeah.
This has been the PodCham Pod draft special. We'll be back soon. Peace.
Peace.